Tonight at the Health and Wealth Revolution, we're going to talk about Lyme disease. We're going to talk about what it really is, why is it spreading, which is really about why do we care to know about it right now. It's the beginning of the summer. And also, what, if anything, can we do about it to prevent it or also to treat it naturally? My name is Bridget Wood. I'm a naturopathic doctor and co-owner of Awakenings Wellness Center here in Maple Glen, Pennsylvania. So what is Lyme disease? First off, Lyme disease is its nickname. It's really a spirochete infection. And the way it's been defined in medicine is very specific. So in medicine, it's related to one tick, the deer tick or the black-legged tick. It's related to one particular spirochete, Borrelia burgdorferi. Burgdorferi is the name of the guy who, on an island between Long Island and Connecticut, discovered and isolated this particular bacteria in a tick. So that's in the locale of Lyme, Connecticut, and that's why they correlated this tick to this illness. Now, the reason we really call it Lyme disease is because in the 1970s, between 75 and 77, something happened in Lyme, Connecticut. There were 31 kids who were diagnosed who all lived on the same street in Lyme, Connecticut with juvenile arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, all around the same time in the summer. And that's really unusual to have that many kids be diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And the doctor that was looking into this was Dr. Alan Steer. So you might have heard of his name associated with Lyme. And after the 39 kids were all identified on the same street at the same time as having, some had bullseye rashes, some didn't, but all showed signs of rheumatoid arthritis in joints. And of course, why would we know anything about that? Because he happened to be a rheumatologist. So there is a connection there. So he identifies this, and later he writes an article called Lyme Arthritis. And it's really about an interesting case of arthritis, a study related to people in Lyme. And he expands his study to include now 51 patients from Old Lyme, New Lyme, and the neighboring town. They're all right there along the coast in Lyme, Connecticut. Now, Lyme disease in this century, and we just started this century, is known as the great imitator. In the last century, there was another disease that was known as the great imitator. In the 1900s, anybody know what it was? Syphilis. So syphilis is also a spirochete infection. I don't know if you're aware of that. And we would put syphilis in a category of lots of venereal diseases. So of course, it was thought that this was strictly passing in that way. But it's very interesting that just 100 years ago, we have another spirochete infection that looks like all kinds of things. And now Lyme disease looks like all kinds of things. So what kinds of things does it look like? Well, right off the bat, we know it looks like rheumatoid arthritis in all ages. But it also, in the chronic state, has a lot of neurological things. So they are misdiagnosing things like MS, multiple sclerosis, or ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, or myasthenia gravis, where I have like really tight muscles and pain and sort of extremities. And we could go on through every single one of these neurological illnesses. We could also talk about brain fog. We could talk about lack of focus, trouble with your memory, can't recall names, because when it gets in the brain, these are some of the things you're going to see. The other things we just talked about are when it gets in the nervous system, and before that with arthritis, when it gets in the joints. But wherever these spirochetes go, they're looking for nutrients. And that's why you start to see these problems occur in the body. So let's talk about co-infections, because really this great imitator is not alone. And the best way to understand this spirochete is not acting alone is to understand why this even is. Why are we talking about a tick? Why are we talking about one specific spirochete? It's a very complex bacteria. It looks a little bit like a worm. He's bigger than most other bacteria. He's smarter. He actually has a tail coming out either end. He can burrow. He has enzymes to burrow through any tissue, liquid or solid. He can get anywhere, including your bones. So that's who we're dealing with. And let's talk about how did he get in there. So we'll talk about the tick. How does a tick feed? So tick goes through various life cycles. And before a female tick drops eggs, they must engorge fully with blood. Now they feed off blood in other stages too. They go through 4 stages, and there's actually some pictures of ticks in the thing that I handed out. You can find the deer tick 3 pages in, you'll see it in there. So when the tick goes through these stages, first off, let's say he lands on you, right? He's actually, the ticks are crawling up on some kind of vegetation, and you are out in nature, and you have some skin that is not covered because it's summer and you're hot. And you walk around and the tick jumps off the vegetation, it picks up on your carbon dioxide, your sweat, and your breath, and it jumps on you. Now once it jumps on, it's looking for a good place to latch. It immediately, when it bites you, injects something that is anesthetizing, so that you don't know the tick is there. So you might feel the tick walking on you, which gives you a shot at getting rid of it. But once he's getting ready to bite, he's going to put an analgesic in there so that you don't know he's there anymore. And the next thing he's going to do is he's going to do that analgesic, he has to actually bite you first, and he has to put some of his saliva, which is where this analgesic is coming from, inside your blood. He also puts in an anticoagulant because he's going to be like drilling here, mining for a while. So he needs to keep this blood moving. He doesn't want that hole to seal up. So he keeps flushing it with anticoagulant. Now he then builds basically a fingernail over top his head and around his body. So keeps this nice big, think of it like a well of blood he's created, and a fingernail over his head. That's why they're hard to get off. It's made of keratin. And now he's left alone to do what he wants to do. And so what he's going to do is he's going to bring blood out of you and fill this little area. He's going to feed, and then just like a cow, he's going to spit in this and regurgitate and swallow and regurgitate. And what he's doing is he's mixing his gut flora, his gut bacteria, with this blood meal. So what do you think his gut flora is designed for? Break down blood. That's the whole point of it. So everything that's in his gut flora has special actions for different parts of blood. But this tick is not just a deer tick. He's a black-legged tick. He doesn't just go, oh, are you a deer? Oh, no, you're a human. I shouldn't eat you. I'll go over here. He's actually going to feed off of up to 200 different species of animals. And when we look at the whole realm of ticks, we're not really just talking about the deer tick. All ticks feed in this manner. And they will try to stay on as long as they can. It takes them about 24 to 36 hours to fill to full engorgement if they're adults. Younger ticks don't feed so long, but that doesn't mean you're not going to be infected by a younger tick. Within a 4-minute period, they have exchanged that saliva, and they've already got some spirochetes going on right there at that site. So within 4 minutes of being there, if he breaks the skin, you're swapping stuff. So he's going to put in things that affect your blood, and he's going to really fill that area near him. That's what you don't want to let get infected, full of his bacteria, because he wants to start breaking down the blood products, so the red blood cells. He wants to break down your white blood cells, your plasma, minerals, even diseases that you have, he has to deal with. And your blood is hot, and he is actually not a hot-blooded animal. Ticks are cold-blooded. So his temperature is going to massively increase. And a lot of these spirochetes are there to help him deal with all of these complex aspects to his feeding technique. So now you understand why the focus is on the tick, but don't get lost on it's a deer tick, because that makes us think only the deers have a problem. And if we didn't just go around the deers, we'd be okay, right? So we live in a land like full of deers here in Pennsylvania. So yes, those deers do have deer ticks. I can tell you, these ticks would love to be on deers primarily. But we don't have herds of hundreds of thousands of deers or elk moving through the United States anymore, or buffaloes for that matter. These migrating herbivores, the ruminids that used to eat the grass, the grazers, this was the predominant way that ticks moved across the land. Well, guess what? They don't move as much as you do anymore. So you're a great host, but you have a really strong immune system. So they have to be able to adapt, and that's what these guys do. They are, of the bacteria, they are highly adaptable. every time they replicate, which is not as often as a regular bacteria. A regular bacteria is within minutes, we're talking about. Every 20 to 40 minutes, we're replicating. These bacteria are more complicated, and they replicate every 1 to 2 days. So it's a big difference in time, which is why it's very hard to manage these guys in the lab. But they're not there alone. And I'll talk about that a little bit more with the co-infections in the next section. So if it really were just this guy, he's still bad, this Borrelia burgdorferi. But let me ask you this. You guys have gut flora. How many bacteria do you think populate your gut? I mean, we see even our probiotics have 6 to a dozen. VSL had like 30 different strains of bacteria. You should be collecting bacteria off your food from the dirt particles that are left on your food if you're not scrubbing it perfectly, which you don't want to be because you do want to get some of those things. They're really helpful for your immune system. So your guts have been designed based on the food you eat. There's an interaction between this gut flora and what we eat because it's there designed to break down what we eat, which is why whatever you eat determines how your gut flora looks. Well, ticks are pretty much interested in blood. They've convinced themselves blood is the banquet they're looking for. But we all have blood, so we, not just deer, humans, we travel all over the world, so we take these ticks with us because we take all of their gut flora with us. Now the important thing is, unless you guys have lived inside a bubble since birth, who here has not had a tick bite? Anybody? 1, 2, maybe 3? Okay. Who here hasn't been bitten by other blood-sucking animals? Horseflies, sandflies at the beach. Anybody? Mosquitoes. That's another blood, and they all have the same kind of flora. Don't kid yourself. The tick is not the worst one. He just feeds the longest. Okay? So bed bugs. Bed bugs are in the tick family. They're a branch. They feed only at night. Lice, mites. There are all these animals, and they're all in a handout here. We'll go through that in the next section a little bit more deeply. But we are not talking about one type of tick and one type of bacteria, one single species of that type, because there are over 22 species that have been identified. Now, we don't talk about any of this because medicine used to be about germs. But somehow, if you live in America, you have this magnificently wonderful life because there are no germs allowed here in America in humans. Your dogs and cats are welcome to have germs and pathogens and parasites, but you don't have them, apparently. It's amazing. I don't know how you do it. But in other countries, if you visit them, good luck. You're bringing home whatever is over there, but somehow America does not allow immigration of parasites, which is amazing. So let's talk about something else. You have a picture of the United States. I'll hold it up. We could say Lyme started here. We could say that. But believe it or not, the bullseye rash was discovered in Europe first, not here. So really didn't start here. But this is America actually calling it Lyme, named after a city in America in Connecticut. So it kind of became our disease, right? It became our problem. So we see the spread of Lyme really from Connecticut moving out. But by the way, if you could see Canada on this map, it's spreading very well into Canada as well. If you would just kind of see it, it's going right up here because ticks here get on birds and birds migrate all over the place. So these deer ticks don't know if it's a bird, it's a deer, they go for animals, whatever they can get on. And over here we have Michigan as a center, or Wisconsin. And Wisconsin actually is where the dermatologist who identified the bullseye rash in the United States, that's where he practiced. So he wrote an article about the bullseye rash, which is why you see people becoming aware. So if they have a bullseye rash, they go, oh, I got Lyme, right? But how many people have a bullseye rash with Lyme? It's less than 20%. Wow. Now, the doctors will tell you less than 50%. But that's true, too, because less than 20 is also less than 50. So it's the truth, but it's not exactly the actual truth. So it's true, but it's not the truth. Let's put it that way. So we do see this because of knowledge, right? So, you know, you have Lyme, you tell your neighbors about it, you watch TV together on your local news, it breaks out here. So there's an awareness thing that's happening. But now we have Lyme reported in every single state in the United States, and we have Lyme reported in Europe, all over Europe and many other countries. So as it turns out, spirochete infections are very common. So then how come we don't all have Lyme? Because all of us are outside, we get bit by all these blood-sucking insects, and it's because for the majority of the population, if you're healthy, your immune system fights this off. These are the same bugs that have been around for since mammals have been around. So you have a relationship with these guys, and they should not be a problem for you. But the real question is going to come in, well, why are they such a problem? And a growing problem at that. So now let's talk about when this all started, what was going on. So we have a dermatologist playing a role, we have a rheumatologist playing a role. So this is how we know this disease is related to arthritis in the skin. Because the majority of studies about this are about arthritis in the skin. And if you show up with a neurological condition, because they like to get into the central nervous system, they kind of don't want to talk to you. They're like, I don't know what your problem is. You don't have a skin condition and you don't have rheumatoid arthritis, so maybe you don't have Lyme. Okay, well maybe I do. But that's not what I know. And so we're really going to talk about the fact that very few doctors have become literate in Lyme. And this has been going on since the 70s. So it's on the news, we all know about it. Anybody that lives around deers has heard about this, but the doctors themselves, they are really ill-equipped for this. And we're going to talk about later what it means to find a Lyme literate doctor to work with. And that's going to be a functional medicine or an integrative medicine type of doctor who is actually studied specially and attends every single Lyme conference because it changes all the time. So what happened back in the 80s and the 90s that might have disrupted funding for Lyme? Because it doesn't seem like anybody cares about it. Well, it turns out that in the 80s or 90s, we had another disease going around called AIDS and HIV. And AIDS is viral, and the CDC got involved with it. And over here we have another parasite infection. It's bacterial. Why wasn't the CDC involved in that? Why weren't we dealing with it as an infectious disease? Because just a rheumatologist and a dermatologist were talking about it. So there's no reason to think of it as an infectious disease, even though we already have the parasite identified. So a lot of the money went to HIV and AIDS, and very little, if any, money and attention went to Lyme. And that's pretty much why we haven't come that far. And doctors are not fully aware or versed in this, nor do they mostly attend these conferences and know what's going on. So you have to be careful who your doctor is. Wait a second. Now let's talk about one other thing. I'm going to throw in a couple of things here. Why Lyme, Connecticut? Why Wisconsin? We can say, well, it's because that's where they detected it first and they wrote the article. But don't you think it's kind of weird that out of the blue, 39 or 51 people, 39 kids get rheumatoid arthritis in this little tiny town on the coast of Connecticut called Lyme, on the same street, in the same couple of months. If you were the rheumatologist, you'd think, like, what the heck's going on? You know, like 39 of my clients have show up and it's a mess out there. Something weird's happened. That's why they wrote the article. They said, hey, just here in Lyme, we got a problem, nowhere else. Well, as it turns out, there was something going on just across the water, 9 miles. There was a military lab over there called Lab 257. There's a book called Lab 257. Because now this is sort of a big deal, and lawyers got involved because people were like suing, you know, for all the money it costs them to have Lyme disease. And they said, why did it happen in Lyme? And as it turns out, there's an island right across from Lyme, Connecticut, 8 miles off the coast called Plum Island. And it's now closed as a military facility, but it was basically a warfare, and they were looking at biological warfare, which of course we're not supposed to do, but we know we do it anyways. So they were actually studying ticks. Now, they were studying viruses. We dropped them in World War II over Russia. We now know the proof of that looking back. At this time, they were looking right after World War II. We even know the doctor who did it. I wrote it down there, Dr. Eric Traub. He went to the Rockefeller Institute. He was a virologist. And he was involved and oversaw the whole tick program. And they were dropping these ticks all over the airway, which was out on the end of the island. They thought the ticks would never be able to get off the island. The ticks are little, right? How'd they get on a boat, right? They can't get off this island. We're safe. We can study them here. Well, that was right after World War II. So maybe it took the ticks a while to get over the water, but it's only 8 minutes and birds fly that far for sure. So the bottom line is it's still spreading from that island. And if you were to go to Long Island, especially on the northern shore, you will see tick warning signs. And I mean, they look really dangerous and scary. They tell you do not walk off the path. Do not go in the woods. These ticks are very tiny and they'll jump on you in the millions. So, you know, you won't even know. Without a black light, you wouldn't even know you were covered in ticks. One of them will get a hold of you for sure, but you can be bit multiple times. If you happen not to take a shower, get into bed, you're going to have many, many, many bites. And you might not even think you had a tick because there's so many and they're all babies. They're all little, but they're just as virulent. So now let's talk about the diagnostics, because now we're getting a little bit into, well, how do we solve this? How did medicine get involved? You know, we need a diagnosis before we can treat anything. So we do have some tests that they use. So first off, this bullseye rash. Less than 20% of people have it, and the people that do have it don't always know they have it. What if a tick bites you in your hair? Like, do you do this and look in the mirror and, you know, with special lenses every night to see if you've got a bullseye rash? No way. No way. So a lot of times you would never see it. If it's on the back of your leg, you might never see it. On the back of your body, it's only there for a short period of time, and you might have a flu after that. That's the acute state of this. So if that's the case, if you see the bullseye rash, what should you do? Go straight to the doctor. They will now treat you for Lyme with antibiotics, and it's pretty well known. It's doxycycline, and a few other things in the cocktail. And yes, you need to be on it for longer than usual, but at least you kill it at the site. There are some natural things you can do, but I wouldn't mess around. But while you're taking those antibiotics from your doctor, I don't care what the doctor says, take probiotics. Because you can't kill your gut flora while you're trying to kill these bacteria, because when you swallow it, where is that antibiotic going? In your guts. So that's a problem. So anytime you take antibiotics, you should be ramping up the probiotics. So there's a couple of other tests they use. The ELSA test, which is like an inflammatory, looking for IG markers of the immune system. It's not a good test. It barely gets, the false negatives are huge. But what do the doctors say? We don't have any false negatives. This test is very effective if the bacteria is actively moving through the blood and you have an active infection. Well, what are the chances? What are the chances the active infection is where they take the blood? These guys are mobile. They also cyst up. The amazing thing about them is if your immune system is intact, they try to hide inside your cells, they try to hide inside your tissues, they try to get into your central nervous system where you got nothing to fight them. And they also make cysts. They build biofilms, which is good to hide in, just like you're supposed to have a mucosa layer to protect all your bacteria. But if that goes down, you got nothing. So that test doesn't work very often. Maybe we're talking about 60% of people that have absolute full-blown Lyme still get a negative ELSA. From time to time, they might get a positive one, but a lot of negatives. So we know, even on a positive case, it's negative. So that doesn't tell you much. Western blot is a much better test, but then there's something called a Western blot or Lyme bingo out there. They tell you, in order for a diagnosis, you need 5 bands. But I will tell you, if you have even 1 band, you have a spirochete infection and it's time to do something. But you will not be diagnosed with Lyme with 1 band, or 2, or 3, or 4. You must have 5. So we're narrowing, again, this tick, that spirochete, how many bands. Now, you want a really good test, you can pay a fortune and go to IGeneX out of California. It's a genetic test. It's pretty extensive, but if they don't prep you for these tests by causing an inflammatory response and kick these guys out of cysts, you won't see anything even with that, because they're still going to take blood. And then there's a whole bunch of other blood tests, CD57, C4A, C3A, blah, blah, blah. So this way you need a Lyme literate doctor. These are the tests that they use today. Now, acute versus chronic. Acute is I got a bite, I maybe have a bullseye, maybe I don't. I have a flu, maybe I don't. Because every time I get bit, I don't necessarily have a reaction. Maybe my immune system is super strong. I have very low stress in my life, and it just takes care of it right at the spot. Everybody cysts up, hides, we're all good. And that will be how most of your life will go, hopefully, maybe all your life. But let's say this gets a hold of you and you just lost your job. Got a lot of stress, right? Or let's say you just lost a loved one. Let's say you're a caretaker. You stress every day. Let's say, could Could be relationship problems. Could be anything. Could be you have a child who's sick. All of these things are going to suppress your immune system. Let's say you love ice cream at night before bed. That's enough to suppress your immune system every single night. Let's say you have insomnia and you can't sleep for a variety of reasons. All these things are going to cause cortisol to go up. So you're in fight or flight all the time. You're not resting. You're not repairing. Your immune system is really being taxed. If you eat all the time, you will not have a very good immune system, because doing that it's either rest, digest, or repair. We don't get to do all three at the same time. So you got to be careful about that. What's it look like chronic? All these crazy diseases. Depends on where it is. And now we're talking about antibiotics, probiotics, herbs. There are some electronic things. We're talking about pulsed electromagnetic devices and fields, heat, sunshine. These are all things that we need to look at for, like, why is this happening? All right, part two. Part two, why is this spreading and why do we care? So take a look again at this map. Do you see Pennsylvania on this map?
Yes.
Is Pennsylvania in, like, the most, like, populated with Lyme disease cases area? Yeah, I was going to say, there's nothing about Pennsylvania that's not red, okay? We are literally the reddest of all of them. There's even a part of New York where they don't have as many cases, probably not as many people. But all the way up and down here, you can see, and we are definitely in a hot spot. We have plenty of green out there, plenty of nature. We get out in the outdoors. And so we need to seriously know about this every time the summer shows up. And the next thing I want you to do is take a look at the next page. And let's talk about Lyme disease. Now this goes up to 2009. I wish I could have found one from 2009 to today, but what you should know is this just keeps going up. There's 300,000 reported cases a year now. That's from last year's results. 300,000 reported cases a year. Now I want you to look at this because there's some politics here. The little band on the bottom, that's reported Lyme cases. Because with most diseases, they don't come along and actively take away your diagnosis. But with Lyme disease, they do. There are some legal issues here. Because of that little war project, there are patents on a lot of these bugs. The military has patents on a ton of mycoplasms, which are in majority of all the North American ticks who are infected with this particular spirochete. Like 65% of the ticks with this spirochete have a load of these special mycoplasms. Mycoplasms have been around since mammals started, but not all of them have patents. That's like the weird part, right? Like patented animals, it's whoa. Okay, so to make sure nobody gets sued, nobody is allowed to die with Lyme, period. So if you have Lyme, they get a diagnosis from that ELSA, from a genetic test, from the BANS test, the Western blot, then they must treat you with a prolonged course of antibiotics. There are certain protocols what they're going to do. Some will do maybe 3 weeks, some will do 6 weeks, some will do 6 months. They're very nervous when they do it if they haven't done it regularly. But let's say they do it and you survive all that. And then you go home, you're feeling better, everything's good. Even if you felt better halfway through, you wanted to quit. They're like, no, keep going. Okay, keep taking them. So you go home and there's stress in your life, and a couple of years later, your neck starts to hurt, or your knee starts to swell, or you have all these secondary symptoms. You go back and say, like, something is not right. And you just keep going back and going back. They just keep saying, no, we cured that Lyme. Remember, you had that treatment and you said you were good. And you say, well, I don't think you got it all. Well, there are a lot of rules about whether or not I can retest you after you've been through treatment. And by the way, after 5 years, I just take you off the diagnosis anyways. So you no longer have it if you don't come and report it again. So this is complicated. And so I want you to know that, look, in 2009, there were 38,000 actual cases in diagnosis and or treatment. But look at all the cases that had been previously diagnosed that were, like, taken off the list. And also, so the CDC said, well, we know, based on the results that we have, that it's either 6 times or 12 times higher than what's being reported. Now reporting is much better, but imagine 6 to 12 times higher than 300,000 new cases every year. And just because they're rolling people off the rolls, does it really mean that they didn't have a bad incident with a Lyme infection? No, they did. And they've got maybe a lot of population in there that one day is going to wake up and haunt them if they have an event in their life. So it's important, like dig the well now or wait till you're really thirsty. Are you going to be able to dig when you're really thirsty? No, so get the well done now. Okay, so now we're going to talk about like co-carriers, co-infections, and big coincidence, because this is really why we care. So co-carriers, I gave you a handout. You'll see all the other blood-sucking animals, insects I should say. So ticks, we said ticks stay on the longest. Of course, if they drop off, they try to jump back on. They got to feed till they're full. But look at all the list of things that you can find in ticks, and they have an analgesic saliva, so you don't even know they're there. These are just 3 Borrelia. This, by the way, is from a veterinary textbook, a medical veterinary textbook. And the veterinary textbook, it talks about all the parasites that humans can get. That's so surprising, isn't it? Because the human parasite book doesn't talk about it. So I was like, that's really strange. I don't know. So that's where I found it. And this is all about where we get human infections from the veterinary medical textbook, which I thought was fabulous. So you can see all the things, and they know they've linked Borrelia burgdorferi and Serena, which comes directly from birds. And they kind of give these things names based on where they find them and isolate them. But I'm going to tell you, all the Borrelias are related. And when they get on a host, they start mutating to adapt to that host. So these guys mutate every time they replicate. Every 24 to 48 hours, they change their stripes just to be better and better at what they do. This Borrelia recurrens causes a recurrent fever. It looks a lot like hot flashes or night sweats. So curious. Tularemia is something they also carry. That also causes hot flashes and sweats. Babesia is an amoeba that actually goes inside and destroys red blood cells. Makes you very anemic. So you can see why it works for a tick to have Babesia. Most of them have Babesia, and there's many, many, many species of Babesia too. Ehrlichia, rickettsia is actually Rocky Mountain spotted fever. You have some other Colorado, spotted fevers, but basically it's all ticks, it's all spirochetes, it's all different kinds. We're talking about over 200 species have been identified. And if you go to the last page, I just went and pulled like the first research paper I could find, because they're now starting to show up, where this is like a taxonomist nightmare. If you go by our rules, technically these are all spirochetes. There's tons of them. And if you go back one more page, let me just show you what we're dealing with here. This sometimes keep it simple, right? A little kiss, never hurt anybody. So we have like round bacteria over here on this side, and these are the ones we know about, like Coccus bacteria, and we see how they're like singles, they're in chains, pairs, and clusters. These are your, bacterial coccuses. So you have all your Coccus cymidus and all these different things. You would have your strep and staph, all that kind of stuff. These are the simple guys. Over here, you have rods, and some of the rods have flagellas. Now they're starting to have like a mobility. But over here, the spirochetes have amazing mobility. They're smart. They do strategic things. They build communities and cities, and they let their friends move into them with them. So these guys, you don't want them. They're like smart as worms. They're smarter than worms even. So that's what you're dealing with. And so they draw the Borrelia one way, and they draw Treponema another, and they draw this other little Spirilla another way. But I could tell you they all kind of look like this, and there's hundreds of them. Not that one little guy we were talking about. Every time a tick bites you, he drops off all of his flora. So you're going to get a sample, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 different strains, all kinds of species, whatever he's been feasting on. Maybe he already had a meal, he picked up something there, he's dropping it off with you too. So that's what we're dealing with. So we're talking about lots more than one carrier, not just one type of tick, but many ticks. We're talking about, they've found spirochetes in over 200 different species of animals. So every mammal you can pretty much bet, but also reptiles, birds, everybody has some spirochetes. And so now we ask ourselves, well, the deer, we know they have spirochetes. Well, why is it that this deer tick, and we're like looking at this one thing, because that's the last big grazing animal left in the United States. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
I apologize for being late.
No worries. Okay. So basically we have the last herd of animals here in the United States. The buffaloes are gone, we have deer, but they don't roam in here herds like elk across the US. They just hide between our yards, right? So we're mixed in with them. But the deer used to have something wonderful, which was national parks where they could spread out and not be afraid of being hunted during certain seasons. And so that's where they used to live. And in those national parks, there used to be a lot of weeds and things. Then the deer turn out they really are herbologists. They know when to eat stuff when they get sick. Like your cat knows if it needs to throw up a hairball, it's got to eat some grass, right? These animals are smarter than we give them credit for. So when a deer has got an infection with spirochetes, a deer will eat thistles. A horse that has certain parasitic infections knows to eat thistle plants. Most large mammals know that thistles are thistle plants for a reason. They have much higher content of nutrition and alkaloids. They are the drugs of the grazing animals. Now, in the spring, thistles are soft. In the later summer, they're very hard, and they will actually break the mouth and everything of these animals. So what they do is very prophylactic. They're very smart. They do preventive medicine. In the spring, they eat every last thistle they can find. Now, here we come into the national parks. We're, lovely park visitors. And we get out of our car, we take our picnic blanket, we take our Frisbees, we go out into the big fields that they've mowed down for us so we can hang out there. And we're running along and we get little thistles and we get things stuck on us. Well, people complained. So they started, when Americans started entering the parks and camping, they started a campaign and they went out and sprayed specifically to get rid of thistle plants. And the reason I know this is because there are several NDs who were associated with my school and other schools that were researching Lyme disease and its growth patterns. And they were going to the parks to wild harvest thistles, which are very useful in cleaning up the neurotoxins that these guys are releasing into the body and helping you to move them out. And they have lots of mineral nutrients. And while they were there harvesting these, they noticed that they disappeared one year. They're just gone. So they went to another park. Oh, they were gone there too. They were gone here too. They were gone there. They're gone everywhere. And when they laid a map of the park spraying, when they finally figured out where we were spraying all these parks, you can see Lyme growing in people wherever these parks are being sprayed, because the Lyme spirochetes are now getting concentrated in these grazing animals, the deer that move in and out of our yards. So we're now in very close contact with them, their ticks, their environment, and we're being used as grazing animals too. So when they killed the thistles, they killed the natural immunity of the deers. The deers became reservoirs for these bacterial infections. The deers move among us, more of the ticks. They actually concentrate the virulence of this bacteria, and now we see it just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So co-infections. This is the other problem. We're not talking about just some spirochetes. There's other stuff in the blood. Babesia I talked about. It's a protozoa, also a smart little bugger. He goes straight for your red blood cells, creates massive anemia, tremendous fatigue, so you barely get out of bed sometime when he goes crazy. You've got viruses. Many of them you already have or you got from different sources. HPV is very common, the human papillomavirus, wart virus. It actually retards the immune system. Every time you're stressed, it comes back out on your nerves. You have herpes, which does the same thing, these very nerve-loving. And you have Epstein-Barr, for example, which probably came to you in meat at some point. And this Epstein-Barr is in the liver and it kind of stays there, and making you very fatigued. And there are many, many other flu and hepatitis and all sorts of nasty little viruses that we have. All these viruses, they stay in the body if your body doesn't detox well. So if our lymphatics are clogged, if we don't move around, if we don't eat healthy, viruses are like toxins that build up in the body and they make the body less able to fight off these other more smart infections. Viruses kind of hang out, but they do a lot of damage to your immune system. Also, we have fungus. Now, why would we have massive problems with candida overgrowth? That's really one change in our diet. They said, oh, fat is bad, sugar, good. Fat's got to go. When fat goes, flavor goes. Oops, nobody wants to eat. Oh, we're going to prepare all the foods in advance. They taste terrible. So we need to add some chemicals to make them taste good, but the fat's not in there. So I got to put something to make you eat them. Let's try sugar. And sugar's cheap. So we went from eating 4 pounds of sugar a year to 140 pounds of sugar a year on average. That's a big jump in sugar. And with that, here comes the yeast that live with us very nicely, become candida and grow everywhere. And they actually like colonize organs and start to eat them. We don't do holding questions till the end.
Can you take a picture of this?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So Babesia, viruses, funguses, these have made it very hard to heal this in the medical community because they're not really, they acknowledge viruses as epidemics only. Once you don't have an outbreak, we don't need to treat you for that. Babesia, they're not really sure they know much about that. That is a protozoa. They try to ignore those, like toxoplasmosis from your cat. They kind of ignore that. By the way, you get some of that too. And funguses, they're not really sure what to do with that either because that involves food. And we're not supposed to talk about food. So basically, we're out of luck with that as well. So over here on this side, I got the bacteria, but these are complex bacteria that they don't have any kind of antibiotics for that are going to be foolproof. Things like mycoplasm are giving us a hell of a time. Mycoplasm, ureaplasm, anaplasms, these guys they don't have a membrane. And our antibiotics, we're lucky that we have a couple antibiotics. We use them for 40 years. We have a lot of resistant strains on the things they do kill. So we're in trouble now. These tools are almost gone for us. The bugs got a lot smarter. But on top of that, with a mycoplasm that has no casing, then we don't have anything that kills it because we're using the membrane, 1 or 2 membranes, to actually kill the bacteria. That guy has nothing on the outside. So, and he's really tiny. Where my spirochete's like a monster, the little mycoplasm can fit like hundreds of thousands of his buddies inside of your cells. So he can easily hide in a cell where there's a less effective immune system. And then we've got, like we talked about all the spirochetes. Borrelia is one family, brachiospirochetes, leptospirochetes, Ehrlichia, rickettsia, that's the Rocky Mountain one. So much stuff, but I wanted you to know the complexity of this because this is why medicine is ignoring it. It's really all of this on this page. And this is really what they report. There's really way more. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of species of these bacteria being moved around by blood-eating insects. And we are now the grazing herd that's a part of their cycle. So you kind of have a feel of this stuff. Chlamydia is also involved with that. There's a lot of chlamydia happening here. Now, who knows if chlamydia has just been around in our culture. Like we were talking about, syphilis was the great imitator of the 1900s. It's a spirochete infection. Believe it or not, gingivitis is a spirochete infection, treponema. They eat your teeth, enamel, and they eat your bones too. So that's why take care of your mouth, because when they finish with your mouth, they go find a bone nearby. So all these guys are trying to get away from your immune system or suppress it or cause it to go crazy by kicking off a cytokine reaction or kicking off an inflammatory reaction every single day. So your adrenal glands are like, whoa, here we are again. We've got to do this again. Next slide. All right, so now let's talk about coincidence. So why are we all so sick? Because we have these great immune systems. We can outsmart them at the site. But there's a lot of other things that have been going on. So we talked about the thistle spraying. That's been going on since we started visiting our parks, but really heavily started in the 70s and 80s. So, but they didn't hit all the parks and they didn't hit them often enough. Now they pretty much wiped out a lot of the native thistle plants, which is why you can go to the park and not get thistles all over you, which makes you happy, but shouldn't be too happy because you got another problem. All right, so since the 1900s and we could say the 1950s, we've had a tremendous decline in the quality of nutrient density in our soil. The organic matter in the soil, the humus, is pretty much gone because they now just put a few chemicals on the soil. They don't use any natural fertilizers, and so you don't have a chance for any of that to build up, and therefore our foods are deficient in minerals, severely deficient in minerals. Minerals are what gives you like a base, a strong base, a strong chi, electrical energy. It's coming from salts and minerals interacting in the body. A lot of enzymes require certain minerals to be tagged on one side or the other. So, in fact, the most important minerals involve zinc, copper, manganese, magnesium. You run out of any of those, you're going down fast, I'll tell you right now. Now let's talk about, there's a great book, from the soil to the stomach. It was released, I don't know, 10 years ago or something by an ND. Fabulous book, talks about how we see like a decline in health in general, and we're seeing ADHD and all these other things right along with the decline of our soils and our food quality. So you think it looks pretty, but they use sprays and things to ripen it up in the truck, and we've got high technology. And so this beautiful food, we hope it's as good as it looks. Colors signal us, so they want to make sure it's got good colors because our brain says that is vitamins and nutrients. Now, if you buy carefully, you can have a lot of vitamins and nutrients, and you should try to get most of them from the food, because the minute I open up that lemon, it's oxidizing because it has an antioxidant in it called vitamin C. And it's not just one thing. It's not ascorbic acid. It's actually bioflavonoids, and there's hundreds of those compounds. You know, if you talk about the colors in the berries and stuff, you know, those are actually signals to us that there's a lot of molecules in there that are very rich in nutrition and natural antioxidants for us. So these are things that are going to help us rebuild our body if we have them every day. And we're totally signaled to go for it. But what if they paint the fruit with a color? Or what if they artificially, like they bring it in green and then they ripen it up in a truck with some chemicals? So they're very good at tricking us. And so what I say is what really happened here, big coincidence, since the late 1800s, we had the introduction and growth of a huge industry in farming. So we got rid of our regular farmers, our family farms, our entrepreneurs, and we replaced them with these huge mono farms where they grow like one thing: wheat, corn. They grow so much corn, it's unbelievable. We feed corn to everything, all the animals that then you in turn eat, even the fish. I don't think fish have corn under the water. I don't know how they got the corn idea for the fish, but the fish said, oh, I don't know, if that's the only thing you feed me, I'm gonna eat it. So this is where your farm caught fish, they're being fed GMO corn. Like all of the animals that are not being, you know, specifically organically farm raised, which is all the industrial meats. So cheap meat, think no nutrition, and also think corn. Cheap meat is corn, basically, and it's all GMO'd and nasty and full of antibiotics, full of pesticides and herbicides and other drugs and things. So be careful when you're thinking about meat. So they introduced the first fake food back in the late 1800s. It was Procter & Gamble. They made candles, and they sold candles. That was like their big thing. And soap. Candles and soap. That's what they did. Soap opera came from that. These companies advertising to women at home, soap opera. While you're cleaning at home, you're watching the TV. That's what it was all about. So these guys said, man, that guy, that Thomas Edison guy, he's a mess. He created some crazy old light bulb. They're probably never going to be able to get that off the ground. Who would want one of those anyways? Wires in your house sounds terrible. But what if they do? We got to be prepared for that. We need a cheap source of fat. And they went to the cotton mills in the South and they said, these stinky old cotton seeds that are rancid and everything, what if you pay us to haul them away? We'll take your trash away. And they said, seriously? Yeah, we're paying somebody else. We'll pay you, no problem. You'll do it for a little less? Okay, no problem. Hauled all those cotton seeds away. German scientist comes in, they create Crisco. Another company creates margarine out of that. They have to like doctor it up in lots of ways and process it like crazy and put color things in there. And why weren't we thinking during those days? And they said to us things like, this fat is so much better than lard. You know, the one you're keeping in the can, the coffee can under the sink? That stuff's nasty. You should use this nice clean Crisco. It's so beautiful and it's light. And then this woman named Betty Crocker, who never existed, published a fabulous cookbook. That was Procter & Gamble, and taught you how to use margarine and Crisco for all of your cooking needs. Oh, and then other Kraft foods and Procter & Gamble foods. And so you kind of got it. You're like, oh, I'm the housewife, I'm watching the soap opera, and now I know how to cook. That's so fantastic. I'll throw my butter out because that's apparently killing me. And I'll get rid of all my lard, and I will cook with Crisco, and I will serve my kids margarine so I can save their life. That's what I'm going to do. And that's how it happened. And that happens in the early 1900s, and health declines slowly, slowly from that point on. This is where we first get Weston A. Price. As a dentist, he retires. He says, man, all my people suddenly got sick. I don't know what the heck's going on. He goes to indigenous countries and he looks at the people who aren't even brushing their teeth and they all got perfect teeth. And he says, like, what's happening here? There's no toothpaste secret. There's no mouthwash secret. They rub a stick on their, gums every once in a while, but like, why are they so healthy? And he studied the diets, put together some components, and that's the foundation of all nutrition, pretty much, what Weston A. Price went and found, because they all had some components that were the same. But I can tell you, fat was a big, important part of it, and we didn't find a single healthy vegetarian community anywhere in the world. All right, so now let's talk about the next thing. What else happened? They somehow convinced us that water wasn't safe. Even though they cleaned it at the plant, it would be better if we put some toxins in it from our mining industry, the fluorides from the mining industry, which we're going to tell you will kill the bacteria in the water, and maybe your teeth will be better because you won't be getting the bacteria or Giardia or things like that from your water. And they said, look, we have a little study that shows that the people who work in the fluoride factories, they don't have as many cavities. They also didn't have any teeth. They all lost their teeth working in the fluoride factory. So I guess you don't have teeth, you don't have cavities. It's amazing. But they did tell, the truth. It just really wasn't the whole truth. So you got fluoridation of water that happens all over the United States. California just picked it up. It was such a good idea. It took California 50 years. Finally, they succumbed. Preservatives got added because this is an industrial thing. Farmers don't add preservatives, but the guys who sell the stuff that the farmers make, and they're going to carry it to the grocery store and it's going to sit there for a while and they want you to buy it, they need to preserve it so they don't have a lot of waste. So they start coming up with great ideas for how to preserve foods. By the way, you eat a preserved food, you're preserving this food right here. It's, it's going to last, but it ain't going to be so good in that state. It's not going to work, but it's going to last. Look like a ham, actually. Then we have toxic fats. They said, these guys said, hey, if we're cooking with this stuff and we're eating this stuff and nobody's dying, they said, let's just put it in more foods. They said, how about soup? They came up with Campbell's soup at the old Procter & Gamble company. And they said, here, we'll test it. We'll test it on humans. So we won't put any of the lard in there, which is expensive. We'll put in the Crisco. That darn soup just lasts forever. They needed to have a soup drive because darn soup never went bad. They're like, give us back your soup after 10 years. Please don't eat it. You might die of botulism or something. We don't know. So that happened. And they eventually told us fats are bad, 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 including all the ones that were good, 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 like all the saturated fats that were keeping all of our relatives very healthy. And keep your immune system very functional and protect all of your lining. All the interior lining requires fat. Requires water, fat, and protein. That's what mucus is. And so let's look at what else happened. So fake sugars were introduced. We had all this corn growing for fuel, growing to feed the animals, growing to feed us. And they said, hey, how about some high fructose corn syrup? This is where they turned regular sugar into heroin. And they said, let's see if we can addict these people through the sugar. If they don't have any fat, they never get full. If I can get them to eat enough of this really super duper high glycemic index fake sugar, they will probably lose their minds and just start eating all the time. And then later we'll tell them grazing is good. And they'll probably believe us because they won't be able to think anymore. So it's going to be perfect. And then they said, okay, we got another problem because iodine is actually in everybody's medicine chest around the United States, and they carry it to war because if they're going to chop off a leg even in our Civil War, I used to think it was whiskey that kept those guys alive because I saw the saws and the movies and everything. Well, it was actually iodine. The medics carried a canteen of iodine, and all the soldiers carried a little canteen of iodine. They told the soldiers, if you have to drink out of a well or a lake or a river, put a drop of iodine in it, and we'll kill all the pathogens in that. And then it's very safe for you to drink. So they had it to purify their water. Why didn't we think of iodine instead of fluoride? I don't know, because we knew about it, but we didn't think of it. And then, okay, with that, now we're going to look at what else do we do with that. We say, okay, this iodine, everybody's got it in their medicine chest. They know it's good for first aid. They put it on every bug bite, every wound, mercurochrome. You remember anything like that? Okay. So they said, this has got to go because iodine actually is another big part of your health. So they said, do an experiment. 1948, Wolff-Chaikoff experiment. They call it the Wolff-Chaikoff effect, and they teach every medical doctor, iodine is toxic. And they require you put skull and crossbones on all iodine products. Even though in 1848, a guy named Dr. Jean Lugel, physician in France, he figured out there was a way to get very safe iodine in the body, water soluble, twice as much potassium iodide, half as much iodine. It matches exactly what the body needs. If I just keep giving it to you, your body will keep taking it because every cell in your body needs it. And things that destroy iodine reserves are things like radiation. Do we have any of that in our lives? Your cell phone, perhaps? Fukushima? Just saying, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl. They were testing bombs all over the place in the Southwest. That knocks it out. That's why the Japanese didn't have to move out after the first 2 bombs were dropped. They just passed out potassium iodide and they said, eat more of your sushi, eat more seaweed, and you'll be fine. And that's what they did. So the ones that weren't incinerated lived, survived, lived without massive cancer problems. It's pretty impressive. They're there now. Fukushima is 6 bombs going off every single day, all day long, 24 hours a day, flooding into the ocean, flooding into the air. They were going to evacuate and they said, no, we did it once before, we can do it again. It would be shameful to leave our country. Wasn't our fault there was an earthquake. We'll stay here, we'll get through it, we'll deal with it. So they're doing it again. They have 100 times more iodine in their bodies than anybody else on the planet. And they are quite healthy as a result of that. So these guys said iodine is toxic. They basically used a kind of iodine that everybody knew was toxic. And of course, it was toxic. Duh, you know? And they said, now tell everybody, get rid of your iodine. And so the bottles that were in your cabinet when you went and bought it again had skull and crossbones on it. And you've been putting it on everything. You're like, oh my God, it's poisonous. I shouldn't use that anymore. What else do you have for me? I'm sure we made something else. But when you go for surgery, they still paint you with a big sponge full of iodine. That's how you survive. Wait a second. So let's talk about what else happened. So after the scientists finished creating fake fats, trans fats and saturated fats, they said, this food tastes like doo-doo, our like TV dinners, right? Because we need a convenience, the soap operas, they're watching, they're learning how do I satisfy my husband, I give him a meal, he watches TV instead of sits with me. It's going to be great. Okay, so we gotta fake it up really good. So we hire a bunch of chemists and we say, we need you to make them like this food because the first TV dinners, who can remember them? They were disgusting. They were like mushy, everything tasted the same, but they did tell you to put them in the oven. We didn't have a microwave yet. So at least you cooked them the normal way. But over the times, they got really savvy and they created these things called excitotoxins, which not only make food taste amazing to your brain, but make real food, this food, taste like garbage. So that food tastes so strong, this food doesn't taste good. If you give up the excitotoxins, very quickly, your brain goes, oh my God, this is so much better. So you will actually change your mind as soon as you change your diet. Just takes a little while. But excitotoxins, MSG, and many, many, many other components to it. They also made the preservatives, they made the color, they made the enhancers, the firmers, the toners, the smoothers, the softeners, the blah, 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 blah. None of that was in that food, so it shouldn't really be in what we eat. But we buy it because we like those things. They also said to the farmers, why don't you just put the pesticides and the herbicides right in the animals because they're all getting sick anyways. And this way, if there's bugs in the animals, maybe you can kill them in the animals before we kill the animals themselves. The animals barely live past their extermination date. If you didn't exterminate them within a week, all the chickens die anyhow of horrible, nasty diseases and viruses, which we all have. So you can do the math on that. I don't know. Out with the fats, in with the sugars. Fats good, sugars bad. Sugars cause inflammation. Dr. Lustig, The Bitter Truth About Sugar. You can find it free on YouTube. Fantastic. Addictions. How many of our kids are addicted? We first got them heroin addicted onto these sugars and sodas and things like that, and then they went to the next step. And sometimes they maybe broke a bone and we said, how about a little bit of a narcotic, you know, Tylenol with codeine or something like that. So, you know, and then we said, you can experiment with whatever you want while you're at school, feeling miserable, eat like a dozen donuts every night. I remember that, right? Ice cream, you know, these kids can eat pizza. They live on pizza all day long. So honestly, is anybody teaching anybody anything about real nutrition? No. So everybody goes crazy. How many of our kids are we losing? How many people are we losing this country to addictions? It goes from sugar right into much, much worse. Monsanto shows up. It was George Bush Sr. that approved them to go green light. on GMOs and go ahead and increase the volume of all things related to glyphosate or Roundup Ready. They spray fields multiple times. You're supposed to spray less, but now we spray more. Glyphosates actually are entering your DNA code and replacing glycine. And so you're not making proper proteins, which is destroying a lot of things in the body, and it's very hard to detect. But this is, you accumulate this, you can't get rid of it. It's getting into the DNA, you ain't getting rid of it then. So you got to be careful to avoid that, and that means avoiding all grain products. Out. And you can trust a lot of it. Because right before, let's say for wheat, it's not quote unquote GMO'd, even though they multiplied the head on the wheat. They took the gluten gene out, they split it up 4 times and put it back in there. So we have all the energy in the wheat plant goes to the sugar, none to the protein. So the willowy fields of grain that we have in our song, they were now they're little stalks that are hollow, and they're the size of the combines that go over them, so they break up really easy. And the seeds explode. Why? Because we spray them with Roundup Ready to kill them and all the weeds right before the tractors go through. So we are not doing farming to make it nutritious or to make it good for us. We are doing farming to make it easy for industrial people to make a big profit. It's a problem. So desiccation is the practice of widespread spraying grain crops right before you harvest. And then the last thing I put there, chemtrails, we'll leave it at that. Yep. Oh, I forgot one little story. Bromide. So up around the Great Lakes, we had a problem in this country with goiter in the 1950s after everybody came home from the war. So we have iodine in the 2 oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, but the Great Lakes are glacier. So there's no iodine in the Great Lakes. So therefore, when the water gets picked up and dropped on the land, there's no iodine in the soil. Now, farmers used to pay to add minerals like iodine to their soil, but if iodine is toxic, I don't think I want to be adding it to my soil anymore now, do I? So when they pronounced it in 1948 toxic, well, now we don't have to supply that. And in fact, corn requires 6 minerals, that's it. So if we grow mostly corn, we don't care if we grow it in dust. Sand, if we could. Just throw 6 minerals in there to grow the corn. So it's really a barren crop. And we all love it, especially sugar. So what I want to do now is ask if there's any questions, and then we'll take a break. Now, we've talked in other videos about what is Lyme disease really, why do we care here in the Mid-Atlantic region, and now we're going to talk about, well, since this is actually a big problem, how do we address it? And for many of us, we're going to talk about preventing future chronic symptoms. But for some, we're going to talk about the people already have had experiences with Lyme and they don't want to get a reaction again, or we don't want to get it even if we want to travel into nature. So prevention, cure, they're kind of the same ball of wax. So first, let me give you a couple of references. I want to tell you, this is the parasitology veterinarian medical book that I had to look through to find out what parasites infect humans from what insect vectors. Why it was in the vet book but not in the medical textbook for doctors that are going to deal with humans is shocking, but there we go. Next, I'm going to point out a couple other references here that would be worth taking a look at. We're going to talk a lot about iodine. So these are two references I'm going to put up. These are very, very easy to read. We have iodine, why you need it, why you can't live without it. This is Dr. David Brownstein. He's an MD, endocrinologist, dealing with a lot of thyroid and autoimmune disorders. And he makes a great discovery that understanding iodine makes a big difference to glandular health. It's easy to read, and there's case studies. I don't care about case studies as much as I like the information, but you're welcome to read both. This is a medical writer, and she heard the first time, I think it was about 10 years ago now, that they put forth the first results of a 5-year study on whether or not we were, as a nation, iodine deficient and what that might mean for our health. And she was there at the conference where it was announced. She has been a very active person in getting together doctors, medical doctors, online to understand this is a huge forgotten piece of the health puzzle. The problem is you can't patent the iodine. So you should know that there were many, many, many drugs. Most drugs were iodine 100 years ago, but now most drugs are fluorides. 65% of all drugs are fluoride-based, another halide. And about 20% of our drugs, the newer drugs, are bromides, another halide. And fluoride and bromide don't belong in the body, but they look as all the world, because they're halides, and act like iodine. So the body will mistake them, and it will go into iodine receptor sites. If you get enough fluoride, i.e. from your water, oops, be careful, or your baby formula or wherever, or you get enough bromide, and that's coming from drugs, but it's also in breads, brominated flour. So this is why we throw out a lot of our grain products. So when you're talking about bromide and fluoride, you want to avoid them. This is also a big, bromide is a big flame retardant. So it's actually in your furniture, in your mattresses, in foams, on carpets, ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. So be careful. It's kind of ubiquitous. So she tells you a lot about that. She also tells you the doctor-approved, MD-approved protocol for reintroducing iodine and pushing the bromide and the fluoride out of the body in a safe and effective way. So you can buy the first book if you are interested, if you have an iodine problem or a thyroid problem, and you can take it to your doctor. And since it's a doctor that wrote it, you can suggest the doctor at least read the first 50 pages maybe if they have the time. Or if they say, no, thank you, I'm not interested, say, well, I'm just going to find another doctor then. It's no big deal. They might have time to read 20, 30 pages. So you just keep shopping, okay? All right, so we have parasitology books that you have to go pretend you're a vet and an animal to find out about parasites. And then we also have the #1 author. This is a master herbalist. He is phenomenal. Stephen Buhner, B-U-H-N-E-R. This guy is the king when it comes to what herbs and what nutrition actually deal with all of these different spirochetes. So he starts off in his first book and he talks about Lyme, Borrelia infections, and co-infections of chlamydia or spotted fever, the rickettsia. So that's like volume 1. And he says, there's more to the story. So he writes another one. This one has in it anaplasm, babesia, and ehrlichia. What to do in the case of these guys. Then he says, that's not it either. Let's also talk about Bartonella and mycoplasma, and he devoted a whole book to these two. So when I tell you these are the most complicated co-infections, these are the ones the Lyme doctors don't know what to do with, but they don't read herb books. So anyhow, here we go. And if that wasn't enough, Booner has been very busy. He wrote the preeminent book on herbs that are antiviral, and he talks about lots of viruses and the top herbs and how to combine them. So you could read this, it's not that hard. And we also have another book for him on antibacterial herbs. I have them both, the other one I can't find right now, sorry. But anyhow, these are amazing books to have in your home reference. If you want to be able to refer to this, somebody calls you, a friend has a problem, it's very nice to say, you know, I don't know anything, but I do have this great book. Let me see what it says. So you could do that. So now we're going to talk about, okay, so let's say we are like most people, we have had an experience with a blood-sucking insect. Maybe it was a mosquito, maybe it was a tick, maybe it was a bed bug, maybe it was lice. We don't know what it was. We saw there's a whole bunch of them, right? And they all have this gut flora. And some spend more time on us, like ticks and bed bugs. Bed bugs are there all night, by the way. They wait for you to go to sleep. They come on you. They don't have an analgesic, so they have to come at night. Their bite does hurt, but you're asleep, thank God. If you were awake, you would notice it. But in the morning, you have bites, and you're like, where did these bites come from? Because they go hide again during the day. They hide in your walls, they hide in your mattress. They are like ticks. They're very similar to ticks. So they know nothing about them. I read the book. Because they're on our beds and not your dog's bed, then it must not matter. People probably don't have any problem with them, right? I don't know. I got to have gut flora. That's all I can say. All right, so let's talk about what can we do. First thing I'm going to say is my plug for the MDs who are trying. There are things out there, MDs, who are called Lyme literate doctors. They will be probably functional medicine doctors or integrative medicine doctors, but they still have to be Lyme literate. How do we know they're Lyme literate? Not because they read an article on Lyme. These are doctors that are going to all the Lyme conferences. There are international Lyme, like Iliad. There's a whole bunch of organizations and Lyme conferences. Ask your doctor if they ever attend Lyme conferences. If you have Lyme and you want to pick a doctor, that's how you do it. And this is from a doctor, by the way. And then the next thing, the books I just talked about. And I will really highly recommend Dr. Eric Berg. If you're curious about medicine and health and nutrition and how your body works, you could have an entire education online at your YouTube pleasure on your TV. It's all free and it's all short videos, and you can search on anything. You dream it up. You're like, adrenal fatigue, I heard of that. Adrenal fatigue and Dr. Berg. He's going to tell you in 10 minutes a little bit, and then you'll see 3 or 4 more that can continue your discussion and education. So if you're curious about this stuff, I really recommend him. All right, next thing we're going to talk about here, these are some key points. Things that really got us to this place, we need to undo them. So like the fact that sugars went from 4 pounds a year to 140 pounds a year per human consumption, we need to take sugars down towards elimination. And sugars is carbs, grains, processed sugars. I'm not talking about giving up your fruit, but I am talking about don't graze on fruit all day long either. So eat fruit like a meal. It's good as a meal by itself. If you have to have a dessert, it makes excellent dessert. But give up the breads, pastas, butter, cookies, bagels, cakes, as much as you can. As much as you can. Lower the sugar. Think 4 pounds a year and try to do the math every time you sit down. You know, divide 4 pounds by 365 days. You get down like a teaspoon or 2 of sugar you can have. That's it. Oops. Okay. The dairy. Pasteurized dairy. Excellent thing to give up because it's been cooked and denatured. No value to you. They try to put things back in, but it's from 1,000, 10,000 cows. It's got a lot of problems. A lot of antibiotics in it, a lot of pesticides, herbicides. That corn's in there. Got a lot of problems. So try to eliminate pasteurized dairy, but you can still have organic yogurt. You can still have raw cheeses. There's 2 or 3 in every grocery store. There'll be like 100 pasteurized cheeses and 2 or 3 real ones, as the French would say. And by the way, the French are darn healthy. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? They're the ones eating all the fat, right? drinking all the wine, but they do walk around their cities. They don't drive as much as we do, so they eat out with their friends. So there's a lot of good things that they're still doing. But let's pay attention to the fact that they do eat the fattiest meals on the planet, and they eat a lot of organ meat, and they're incredibly healthy. Where's our liver? You couldn't eat it today; it'd kill you. So I'm talking animal organs, not your own liver, of course. No Chianti and all that stuff. All right, let's talk about keto diet. Why is keto diet so cool? Because they told us no good fats for so long. We are now very deficient in essential fatty acids. So I have a lot of props here to talk about how do you get your essential fatty acids. Still the best way to get vitamin A, which they pretended is beta carotene. So you see the colors, we think beta carotene. Got it in those peppers. We got it in everything that's yellow, red, and orange, I think they told us. However, beta carotene is a precursor. You really have to put it all together. So if you want to get the real thing, you want retinol. Retinol is a fat, and it's retinol, retinoic acid. These are all the forms of vitamin A, and you want to get it from a fish oil, preferably like a cod liver oil, which maybe you heard your grandparents talk about. Very good for health. Now, your vitamin E, by the way, came from nuts and seeds. So I have some nuts and seeds here. Now, this is about the amount of nuts and seeds you should eat. Now, this is maybe larger than what we might have in a big bowl at the TV. So this is your whole day. Don't dare go over this. So if you are like sitting there munching on the peanuts like all night long, which by the way is not a nut, it's a bean, it's a legume, which it's the crappiest one too. And soybeans aren't nuts either. They're the crappier ones. So we got like two bad ones and we got some good ones here. So pumpkin seeds are incredibly good for you. And guess what? They're anti-parasitic. So pumpkin seeds I highly recommend. Why are they anti-parasitic? They're anti-parasitic because they are loaded with bioavailable organic zinc, organic manganese, which kills roundworms. Zinc kills hookworms and pinworms. Those are all good reasons to have them. They also have a lot of magnesium in them. We're going to talk about magnesium on the next page. But magnesium actually has some very good benefits to us. And they even have good calcium, but they have way more magnesium. They have potassium, things we need more of. We need less of sodium and calcium. And they have zinc, and they have a little selenium too. So these are like phenomenal. Gobble them all day long and all night. Pumpkins actually have vitamin A. Next to cod liver oil, they're number 2. Ooh, that's interesting. Okay, I have pine seeds in here. It's from a pine tree. Is that a nut? Yes, it is. It's a nut from the pine cone. And it's really a good nut because nuts come from trees. So this is actually an evergreen nut. And it's really full of great oils and turpentines. Turpentines, that's a paint thinner. I don't want that. No, these are also excellent parasite killers. So it's a good nut to have around. Now, the ones we like, the almonds, do not be drinking almond milk and think you're eating almonds. Almonds are very high in potassium compared to calcium, which you will like about an almond, but don't be drinking it because you just threw out a lot of the good stuff in the almond to drink the almond milk. Walnuts. Why are walnuts so good? The hull around the walnut, the green hull, if you've ever known anybody that's picked up walnut hulls or picked up walnuts off their property, they are covered with like purple hands for months. That's iodine. Walnut hulls are like 80% iodine. So the walnut actually picks up a little bit of that, and therefore it itself is like got some selenium in it. It has some other minerals in it, and nuts are usually full of minerals. Why? Because these trees are tall and they have deep tap roots. But the best nut for the deepest taproot is actually the Brazil nut. Grows in the rainforest, as tall as that tree is, and they get to be a couple 100 feet tall. They go straight up. It has a taproot that goes straight down, insanely far down into the ground. And they say, oh, well, you don't really want to eat a lot of nuts because they have like uranium in them. I don't care. It's organic. It's not the radioactive kind. But the Brazil nut is very high in selenium. Very important selenium, very good for your immune system. If you want to get rid of parasites, you're going to need selenium to protect your heart because your heart has a lot of mitochondria and they like to eat mitochondria and your heart's kind of important. So I think we want to put a little fence around the heart and say like no parasites in here. Thank you very much. Parsley. This is like not just a pretty herb, and even the crunchy one, don't leave it on your plate. This is probably the most nutritious thing on the plate when they serve you something out at a restaurant. Eat all your parsley, loaded with bioavailable minerals. The greener it is, and the grasses, especially like wheatgrass, barley grass, pain in the ass to juice them, but very, very good, nutritious, because grasses know how to pull minerals from the soil. That's what they do. They got to be in rich soil. Well, what's another grass we know about that we don't think is a grass, but it is? Sugarcane. Sugarcane has phenomenal minerals, but not in the sugar that we eat. Even the cane sugar that we eat. They pulled them out and left them behind in a thing we love called molasses. Molasses is all the leftover mineral sludge. Now it's been cooked a little bit, but guess what? Minerals are still decent after they're cooked, and they still are attached in many cases to organic molecules. So you can actually use molasses a little bit. Remember, you got 4 pounds a year. Count it. Not a lot of sugar, a lot more minerals in it. Other things that we're going to talk about in a minute, but these are nutritions and superfoods I put here that you want to pay attention to. Also, why do the Italians eat the herbs that we have on the table there? Italians are eating not as much dill as the Romanians are, but they do eat a lot of basil, a lot of rosemary, a lot of thyme, and oregano. Oregano is probably one of the best things to kill fungus out there, and it does a pretty good job on bacteria. Thyme does an amazing job on bacteria. It's like 99.99% kill with thyme. So you want to add thyme. That's why thyme and marjoram and oregano were rubbed on meats, along with a heck of a lot of salt. So before refrigeration, that's how you cured a meat, because it was going to get worms if you didn't do that, or worse. Flies are going to land on it and they're going to leave a little larva in there. You don't like that. So you want to take a look at these herbs, and don't just buy them dry. Grow them at your house. Get them fresh. It's worth it to pay the extra money. Put them in your food. That is natural antibiotic, natural antiviral. They are loaded with good nutrition, and they have all those properties. That's why they are so used. And these are the aromatic herbs. Okay, so let's see if I didn't forget anything. Onions and garlic are also in that bowl, along with some broccoli. I have broccoli raw, but I didn't put it in the bowl. These are cruciferous, high sulfur vegetables. Pests and parasites don't like sulfur, and you do, because sulfur is what your neurotransmitters are made from. And it's a lot of immune molecules use sulfur as well. And glyphosate, we talked about in an earlier talk, glyphosate represses sulfur, manganese, magnesium from being extracted from the soil up into the plant. So plants that are supposed to have a lot of that stuff don't anymore, because Roundup Ready blocks it. That's how it works. And that's why they can genetically alter the plant. They just alter it not to need certain things and survive, whereas most normal plants that are highly concentrated with minerals can't survive without nutritious soil. Hence the thistles. They're easy to kill with weed killer because they are the most nutritious. They get wiped out when you block certain minerals. All right, so let's go ahead and flip. So here's things we can do. I would love to just start with iodine. I wrote the talk and put iodine at the top almost every time. But I'm going to tell you iodine's at the bottom now. We're going to cover the top part really quick, because if you just do iodine and you eat sugar and ice cream at night, and you don't sleep because you're insomniac, or you're like me, you study all the time, you stay up, your stress level is going to be very high, and you are not going to get all the benefits. So I could tell you about the iodine protocol first, and you would all just say, well, why do I have to listen to all that other stuff? Well, you have to do the other stuff, because then the iodine protocol won't work if you don't do the other stuff too. So the iodine will go in as long as the body is willing to accept it. It kind of needs some basics first. So I'm going to tell you one problem why we got all these parasites flourishing: very low oxygen levels in the body. There are many reasons for it. If your sugar's too high or too low, so you're hypo or hyperglycemic, you are not going to have your sugar level right in the blood. It's going to skyrocket when you eat something processed, sugary, and it's going to drop like a rock. Chromium is another mineral you can't live without. If your chromium is low, you will eventually have diabetes as a diagnosis, and the drugs for diabetes are made of chromium. So, however, they're synthetic. So what you really want to do is get some chromium in your diet so that your sugar can regulate. And so you don't want your sugar vacillating. You want it to be right in the middle so you don't have an inflammatory reaction. So I need you to practice breathing, because it's free. Now, why would we practice breathing? Aren't we all breathing? When you're under stress and you're walking around and you're all tense and you're like sitting at your computer and your neck's like this, you are breathing with the top third of your lungs. You're talking about a 60% reduction in oxygen. Shallow breathing is very destructive to the body over time. We all do it. Hence, good reason for meditation, silence, yoga, whatever you got to do, or just 20 minutes in the morning or at night. Just breathe with your diaphragm. Stretch this muscle. It will relax your neck and everything else. It's totally worth it. And there's a guy, Wim Hof. He's actually able to climb Mount Everest in his socks and a turban around his head and his shorts or underwear. Looks more like underwear. With no oxygen, supplemental oxygen. He's got the record for it. He's run Antarctica in bare feet. He's done things nobody thought were possible. He can control his autonomic nervous system. And how did he do it? Through increasingly focusing on inhalation. He inhales, 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 and your mom said, don't do that. You're going to pass out, right? You're going to get hyperventilated. You don't. This is how deep sea divers, the ones in the islands, teach their kids to go down and fish. You can stay down 10 minutes, 12 minutes. Hunting for lobsters if you can get enough oxygen in your body. So it's called oxygen flooding. You look up Wim Hof, W-I-M Hof, H-O-F-F. He's also on YouTube. He'll tell you everything about what he's doing for free because they thought he was a freak, but he's an identical twin. And his twin couldn't do it. So he started teaching regular people, and now you can get them to climb the mountain in their underwear. It's fun to watch. You're going to have a good time. It's like a comedy night at first, and then you're like, that's interesting. So, but he just inhales as hard as he can go for like 20, 30 minutes. You'll flood your body with oxygen, and guess what's happening? Now your body is like turned on. It's going to fight the heck out of these guys and start detoxing, do all sorts of good stuff. So flood your body with oxygen. Check out Wim Hof. Number 2, drink mostly water. Give up everything else but herbal tea and water to the best of your ability. I'm not saying, 1 cup of wine with dinner, or even NIH said that was good. But just remember, 4 pounds of sugar. What's alcohol? Oh, sugar. Okay, it's also hot sugar. What's soda? Hot sugar. Really, really take out the sugars that are the most damaging. Plus, it is got to be detoxed by your liver. So, drink mostly water. That's the key. Be kind to yourself. If you drink wine, if you have a soda, don't beat yourself up for 3 days. That's stress you don't need. That's negativity you don't need. If you're going to do it, talk it up to yourself. My God, this chocolate cake is the best chocolate cake I ever had. And the soda tastes good too. And tell your body, this is good. This is coming down good. You're going to manage it. You're in such good shape now. I take good care of you. Eat only that most of the time. We're going to be fine. Do that. Don't tell yourself, oh my God, I'm so terrible. I'm eating this chocolate cake, but I'm eating it. So if you're eating it, be good with it. All right, next. Rest your digestive system. We heard from Dr. Connor on a previous video. Intermittent fasting is probably the number 1 thing you can do because it's rest, digest, or repair. We don't get to do rest, digest, and repair all together. So we usually repair at night when we shouldn't be digesting anymore, right, because we're asleep and hopefully fasting. Resting, we shouldn't be eating while we're asleep. So the body worked this out pretty good until we figured out how to, wake up with Ambien and fix ourselves a meal in the middle of the night while we were sleepwalking. That was weird. I'm sure the body is very confused about this, but it was designed to rest, digest, or repair. So try to give yourself 16 hours without eating. The best 16 hours are probably the ones you just slept through, 8 of them, and then try to go till lunch. So that's another really good thing. And then when you do eat, try to eat the highest quality meal you can. You don't have to cut back on calories. If you're trying to lose weight, that's another talk. But if you're just trying to be healthy, eat a ton of vegetables. I mean a ton. That bowl right there, this red bowl full of salad is not inappropriate. If it's all salad, greens and a little handful of nuts on top, blah, blah, blah. That's going to be potassium. You're going to need it. It's going to be fiber. It's going to sweep you through. That's all good. But, should you have that much meat? No, not really. It's going to be really hard on your body. Even if it's the best meat and you killed the cow yourself. So let's go to talk about number 4. It's about attention and focus. So really, really important. If you're eating the right stuff and you're drinking water and you're doing all this and you're running around all negative, or you have a very negative friend or partner or spouse or kid or somebody in your life that's in one ear with negative thoughts, and you're like, your emotions are just like taking a tank every time. Unfortunately, this is the first thing you got to detox out of your life. So you can turn it around by turning yourself around. When you get happy, we learned this in the telephone company, people cannot stay miserable around you very long. They will do one of two things. They will become happy with you, okay, and they'll fight it for a while, or they'll leave. That's okay. Either way, it's very passive. So raise your own vibration, raise your own positivity, and let the negative people move away from you. They will on their own. But very important for you to watch your thoughts. All disease starts in the body with an emotion. It was hard for me to grasp this, but if you read any book on why people don't heal, it is always because negative emotions are held in the body. It's where they're held, that's where your spirochetes will go and return and return and return. So you've got to fix that if you want to stay well for the next 20, 30 years. All right, next, fun, sweaty activity. And we don't want to be afraid of ticks or mosquitoes or any of that. So you still want to do a lot of it outdoors. The sun is really a good source of energy. There are people called breatharians. I'm not sure if it's a myth or not, but they just live on water and they eat like 600 calories worth of food once a year or some crazy thing. Now, I don't know if it's a myth, but it's very likely, and all they do is meditate and sit on top of mountains, that you could get by on a way lower amount of food if you started early, because technically you're not rebuilding a whole body every day. So a lot of what you're doing is just refinery work. You're just passing food through your body, making it work really hard, and spitting it out the other end. And you're taking a few things here and there that you need to put stuff together. But if you never get those few things, your body's going to make you go crave more food. So stick with nutrient dense, eat what you need, but don't eat when you're not hungry, and get outside. If you go outside, your hunger will drop, because you'll get a lot of sun energy. Hydrogen, pH stands for hydrogen potential, H+. That's what we get from the sun. I know it sounds crazy, but on your skin, remember they all told you made vitamin D. Why do they tell you cover it up all the time now? Coincidence. That's where we're gonna go with that word now, coincidence, right? So you need not just 20 minutes of sun. Now, it's interesting, if you have really dark skin, because you live near the equator, that's a coincidence, because it's darkening up the melanin to not absorb too much of that radiation to take what you need if you're going to be out all day. But if we're not out all day because we live in northern climates where our skin is lighter, we actually take in more very quickly, and then we get what we call a suntan. That's so cool. That's the melatonin, like a meteor, the melanin building up in the skin to say, hey, found some sun, thank God. So we can all be a little bit tanner, which we would all like, right? People who are dark want to be lighter. We all want to be tanner. If we could all be in the middle, it'd be great. But it's worth it to get some sunshine every day. You'll build up a tolerance to it, and you'll make vitamin D. And another cool thing, you make sulfur products on your skin, only if you eat good fats. So cholesterol is important to this sulfur product making activity. So sunshine and get sweat means open up your pores. You need to actually use your skin as a toilet. It'll help you get things out from wherever they are. So the next thing is support all your elimination pathways. They're called the bulls for short. The bowels, the urinary system, the lungs, the lymph, and the skin. And it's the skin on the inside and the skin on the outside. We're donuts. Skin on the outside is kind of hard and dries and flattens and falls off, or we should really be scrubbing it off maybe to keep our pores open, because we actually breathe through the skin. Your skin is the last to get oxygen, so it actually takes it right from the air. So they didn't believe this, but the pores open and close at very, very fast rates. If you put a whole bunch of gunk like sunscreen, coincidence, on your skin, it can't breathe. A bunch of chemicals, the skin's so toxic, it can't do this breathing activity. It doesn't get oxygen, it starts to die. It looks gray. Coincidence. All right, so get outside, sweat, open up your pores, get the skin working for you. On the inside, you have this nice mucus protective layer. You don't want to not have that. So you need fat to make it, you need water to make it, and you need good protein to make it. That's why it's slippery and ooey, and you don't want it to be sticky and chunky. You want it to be like flowing freely. That's how we get the stuff out, and that's all the passageways that are exposed. So that is the defense system. And in that system, there should be a very critical component called iodine, which we'll talk about in a minute. You can do all sorts of cleanses for the bowels, support the kidneys, support your adrenal glands, which help control the kidneys. You can clean the lungs. It's important to do all these things. If stuff's going out fast like it's supposed to, you're going to be healthy. Because you're putting toxins in, you want to make sure you're going out at the same rate or faster. All right, supplementing. It's a careful subject. Supplement with the things you can't get in your food. If you can get it from your food, you're going to get it from your food. So vitamin E with selenium, in some cases it makes sense to have a little extra, but definitely you want to get it from a little bit of nuts every day, not a whole bag of nuts at TV time. Vitamin A and D, it is fish oil. Don't mistake it for anything else. You really need to take a good, healthy, clean, unoxidized fish oil. And next one is vitamin K2. That is from your greens. The problem is we're not cows. Cows have 3 stomachs. They chew their cud or regurgitate and swallow like 200 times. That sounds like a tick. I don't know, just coincidence. Okay, so bottom line is greens are very hard to get the magnesium out of. Fun fact, your hemoglobin, which is what keeps you alive, is a very complicated and interesting molecule with 4 little irons stuck in it. Chlorophyll is the exact same molecule with 4 little magnesium stuck in it. That's where you're getting the magnesium from in plants. So you got to get all the way into the chlorophyll. And you could take a chlorophyll supplement, which might be a good idea. So, superfoods, things like chlorophyll, things like these herbs, things like fruits. Fruits are actually high in acid. When you eat acids that are living and fresh, you will excrete alkalines. When you eat food that's cooked or processed, it's alkaline, you will excrete acids. That's how the body works. It translates the pH. So you actually want to eat acids and get rid of alkaline, but you need an acid mouth and stomach in order to do it. So we don't want to be a 7 or 8 up in here like I've heard. We don't want to be drinking 8 water, alkaline water. You'll kill yourself with that and have osteoporosis in 5 years or less. So please don't do that. Drink real, regular water, but clean. But superfoods are important. So add these dense nutritional foods to your diet. Citrus. Why are citrus important? They break down biofilm. If you want to get rid of stones in your kidneys, stuff in your gallbladder, chunks and things like that. If you want to get rid of the biofilm and the plaques that these spirochetes create around them to build their cities behind, you're going to need to do some really serious citrus. And I'm not talking about oranges. I'm talking about the sour stuff. Grapefruits, pomelos, lemons, limes. I've seen people drink like an entire half a gallon of this stuff. You can get it down, and if you don't like the taste, add a little olive oil to it. It'll be like drinking dressing for a salad. It tastes fantastic. I will tell you that. You'll be surprised. But you need to get some lemons and limes, put them on your salads, use them on your meats, use them on your foods. That's the real vitamin C. Iodine we'll talk about in the next page, but another fun fact. So our American diet, this is the parasympathetic nervous system on the top of this chart, the sympathetic nervous system on the other side. Sympathetic, fight or flight or freeze, okay? Parasympathetic is rest, digest, repair. So we have 4 minerals. They have inverse reactions. They're right next to each other on the periodic table. Sodium is right next to magnesium, and potassium is right next to calcium. They're 1 number away from each other. So sodium and calcium are being pushed and are in our diet. They want us to take calcium pills and all this kind of stuff, chews and things, extra calcium added to our milk for keep our bones nice and strong. Lie. Okay, sodium, NaCl. First they said, there it is, your salt, put it on everything. Then they said, oh, no, it gives you high blood pressure. Why? Because sodium actually inhibits the parasympathetic nervous system, and calcium activates fight or flight. This is why our blood pressure is like skyrocketing. We need to flip the switch and bring in the magnesium from the green plants and the potassium from all vegetables. So magnesium actually inhibits the fight or flight response. So an Epsom salts bath, which is magnesium sulfate, sulfur good for your joints, magnesium good to calm you down, will literally take you right out of stress and calm your adrenal glands. And potassium, which actually activates your parasympathetic nervous system, will lower your blood pressure. And talk to an EMT, and they will tell you they inject it into the veins of somebody who is like having high blood pressure through the roof. And then they immediately inject epinephrine because the heart will stop. Then they're going to start it again, blah, blah, blah. But when you eat it, you don't have to worry about it. The body knows how to do this. So 7 to 10 cups of vegetables a day, preferably most of them greenish or colorful. That would get you the amount of potassium you need. And there's something called potassium citrate. And even though my EMT scared me, you can supplement with it, but talk to somebody before you do it. Flip. All right. Sleep. Sleep is very important. Ambient sleep doesn't count. All those other sleeps don't count. The fake sleeps. You need really deep sleep. And for that, you need to clean the liver. I know, I was an insomniac for my whole life and I had liver problems. If your liver is not well, you won't sleep. If you drink alcohol at night or have ice cream at night, these are high sugar foods right before you go to bed. Insulin and melatonin, we learned from Dr. Connor, fight each other. They have inverse reactions. So if you eat a meal in the morning that's high carb, you won't even see the increase in your insulin that you would if you ate the same meal before bed, because that insulin has to go up a lot higher to fight the natural melatonin that rises in the evening. So if you're going to eat bad stuff, do it earlier in the day. Clean up your diet at night, much as you can, and give yourself 3-4 hours to digest and get it out of your stomach and out of your small intestine if you can before you go off to sleep. Antibiotics. If a doctor ever puts you on antibiotics, in the case of Lyme, they're going to want to do that for 6 weeks to 6 months. You need to take probiotics, and you have to switch brands. There are a lot of, every probiotic's got a different cocktail. So you don't want to stick with one too long. You want to migrate from one to another. There's different strengths, different things out there. VSL, which is one of the biggest ones, recently stopped being produced. Coincidence? I don't know. All right. Number 10, detox the body. Periodically, and cultures have always done this. I mean, you know, when I visited the Amazon and the little kids are running around with a big belly, we're like, what's that? And they're like, oh, they got worms. And we're like, you're not concerned? They're like, nah, we'll deworm them in a little while. Don't worry. They got to get used to the worms. They got to build up an immune system. You're like, whoa, sounds like child abuse. That's when I was a tourist, didn't know anything, but that's a natural way. You let your body have the experience. Oh, it sounds like a vaccine, coincidence. And then you get rid of it. So you could actually eat a whole handful of pumpkin seeds and all those worms will come out. So you do need to detox the body regularly. There are seasons for it. The Chinese figured out. The kidneys really need to be taken care of in the fall after the summer when things are going to get cold. They know that the cold damp is what kills you. So they get the kidneys ramped up. But remember, the number one eliminative organ in the body is the lungs. This is really the big deal. And when I looked at it, 70% of the body is water. I did a whole analysis of the elements. It'll be a different talk. As it turns out, it isn't all that much water. There's a whole heck of a lot of carbon molecules, and there's a whole heck of a lot of oxygen in the body that actually is counted in the weight. So it turns out that there's hydrogens and oxygens that aren't water in the body, which shouldn't blow anybody's mind who had organic chemistry. Coincidence. Anyhow, so we got water, but all the water that's in there is in a salt matrix within or between the cells, and there is an electrical charge. We need to keep a charge on the inside opposite from the charge on the outside, just like along your nerves. There's a charge that flips. That's your sodium, potassium thing going on. So we know about some of these things, and also magnesium plays a role with calcium in your muscles, flipping like that. So if you want to get rid of cramps, you can't just do calcium or magnesium. You got to kind of do them both. So we do need to detox, and we need to look at all those eliminative organs, and we need to support the lungs, clean them up, keep them clean, support the kidneys, support the adrenal glands. You don't have to worry about your skin. It's taking care of itself. Just keep it clean. You can dry brush it, though, because the lymph, one way to get your own lymph treatment every day is you use a dry brush. And I have one here. I'm going to run away from the camera for a second. Okay, this is a free manual lymphatic drainage device. Now, you can buy a rebounder, and you can jump on it. So if I do this and I did this, I'm getting like a $90 treatment in 5 minutes. It's fantastic. And you're just going to like use the brush part, and you're going to go up towards the creases in the body. So from the extremity to the crease before you get in the shower. It's a soft brush. All it's doing is the little bristles are grabbing a piece of skin, stretching it, and letting it go. Exactly what she took years perfecting, and she is one of the best I know. Worth every penny, but this is $10. So like I can do this every single day in my bathroom. Don't share this with your partner. It's got all the skin in it and everything, but whatever. So I would do this every day and you'll move your lymph. And then if you also do a little rebounding, jumping or walking in any way, lift yourself off the ground or jump in a pool, walk down back and forth in the pool, you'll be moving your lymph and you'll take care of the biggest, most important organ to detox and support your immune system. So detoxing, very important. And you should kind of oscillate that with restoring organs. Herbs do restore. Detox, you're flushing things out. So you don't detox and restore at the same time. You do one, then the other, one, then the other. Lastly, we have iodine. I don't have time to cover the entire iodine protocol here, so I gave it out in a handout. So we're going to hit highlights. Okay, so first page is like little information about iodine that's kind of important and fun to read. Tells you kind of how we got to where we are today, and iodine plays a very critical role. Skip over a couple pages, and this is how the body uses iodine. This is the most important thing to look at. So the thyroid, 65% iodine. We know about the thyroid because of the goiter incident back in the 50s. We had a whole bunch of goiter in this country. Around the Great Lakes, they have no iodine in them because they're glacial bodies. The Atlantic and Pacific had it, and it falls on the land about 100 miles from the border of the ocean. Turns out 90% of all the population has lived for thousands of years within 100 miles of an ocean. There's a reason for that. If you were to live by the Great Lakes back in the past, you would be very sickly, so you might not live there very long. So you need to be around a place where there's iodine. There's even an example in here that you can read about where there was a province in China where they had a lot of people who were, they considered the idiot province. So they had a lot of stillbirths, a lot of spontaneous abortions, infertility problems. They had, the death rate at birth was very high, a lot of mentally retarded children. Kids didn't grow, they were all very short. And they said, somebody showed up and said, wonder if this could be iodine. They stuck a big barrel of iodine upside down on a bridge, had a guy with a gun guard it, and it just dripped into their irrigation canal. And within 1 year, they beat the national average of growth in that province by 4 inches for kids under the age of 16. So all the kids shot up, like, whoop, like a rocket. IQs improved. That doesn't happen very often. Birth rate went up, fertility went up, and now they are no longer known as the idiot province. 1 drop of iodine just dripping into a single irrigation canal that put enough iodine in the soil to change all that. So it's powerful. So the thyroid controls all the metabolism in the body. T3, T4, one's active, one's not. Just giving people a whole bunch of Synthroid T4 doesn't mean you can take out their thyroid. It's very silly to think that. So every cell in the body needs iodine. That's how it talks to the thyroid. And there's a lot of relationships, stress relationships with the adrenal glands. You pick up for the ovaries and menopause for women, but men probably go through it too. So adrenal glands actually get very stressed after we go out of our hormone cycle later in our life, which is why you don't want to be under stress at that time, which is exactly when we're under stress, because we're, thinking about what do we do for money, jobs, sickness, blah, blah, blah. Coincidence. All right. All the glands in the body have iodine, and their structure and function is protected by iodine. You have a lot of iodine in ovaries, a lot of iodine in the prostate gland, and you have a lot of iodine in these 2 little glands in the brain called substantia nigra that actually pump it into your cerebral spinal fluid. You have iodine in your mucosa. It's there to keep things from crawling through it out into the other parts of the body. So if you're deficient in iodine, you are an open season, like hunting is always open in there. So we need to put the iodine barriers back. Why would iodine be gone? That's a good question. If we had enough to be born and survive, because this is what happened in China, they didn't have enough to even be born. It's part of the brain development, it's part of the cerebral spinal fluid and the whole function of your nervous system, because it's the heaviest of the salts, and it's a halide, very important one. If you don't have that anchor salt, you can't keep the salt matrix inside of your cells very well. So a little iodine goes a long way, but you need a lot of it, and it gets pushed out with radiation. Cell phones, microwaves, all sorts of radiation dislodge iodine. It's used to protect the body from the effects of radiation. So you need it for glands, that's kind of important. You need it for protection of your DNA. It also blocks tumor formation. Don't we have a lot of cancer in this country right now? It also is a key part of your immune system. It prepares the fetal brain for development. Without it, you can't even get pregnant. So look at all the infertility that we have. Just a little iodine could go a long way. Coincidence? It protects everything from radiation. This is how the Japanese were able to stay in Japan after the 2 bombs, and they've been there since Fukushima went off 8 years ago. 6 bombs going off every single day, and they're still living in their country. They were going to abandon it, but they just eat a lot of seaweed. So kelp has the most of it, of any of the seaweeds, but there are others like bladderwrack and dulce and a few others around the world. And medicine men have been collecting these seaweeds and using them as medicine for thousands and thousands of years. So we need to put the iodine back. Now, what else caused the iodine to go away in America? Because we are severely to moderately deficient at 90% of the population. That's what David Brownstein and other scientists have measured in thousands of people in their clinics and around the United States. So where did it all go? Well, fluoridation in the water, fluoride's a halide, pushes iodine out of the receptor site. Body, if you put enough fluoride in, iodine flows out. And where's the iodine coming from to replace it back again? Not coming from anywhere. So we'll have to use fluoride. We don't have any iodine anymore. Bromide. Bromide was what they used first with the goiter problem in Michigan. They said, let's put iodine, because they knew it fixed goiter and tumors and all that, and the thyroid. Let's put iodine in the salt. Oh, but they didn't tell you this. They also put it in all the sugar products, all the breads, cakes, cookies, candies. It was required as an additive, a softener, conditioner for breads and baked goods. So it went in all baked goods in the United States for 10 years, along with the salt. You do not get much iodine out of salt. If you did, we could just get it all from our sea salt. Now, I bought a sea salt because I wanted to see something. So I bought also a pink salt because I have something else I'm going to show you. So the sea salt says, this salt does not supply iodide, a necessary nutrient. So here on the salt, suddenly iodine's a necessary nutrient. But this is sea salt. Isn't there iodine in the ocean? That's curious. So if I put a little iodine in my table salt, which is shaped like a little diamond, really hard and scratchy, and I put some aluminum in there, condition, all kinds of other things, am I supposed to get my entire iodine supply from salt? Oh, no. If you eat too much of that table salt, you get high blood pressure. Don't eat it. Huh? Oh, don't worry, we put it in all your processed foods. Have McDonald's, you'll be fine. Well, that's crazy. And I said, okay, I don't understand that either. Celtic salt, by the way, France, has the most mineral content because it has a little silica in it. And the silica has absorbed a whole bunch of minerals from the ocean, and they don't take all the silica out. And believe me, just like a bird, you could use the silica to help you absorb some of the toxins. And then I said, well, how much is the difference between sea salt and Himalayan salt? And I said, let's see about the sodium, for example, because they have to measure that. So this is the same thing. 1/4 teaspoon is actually the same serving size. Here I have sodium content, 550 milligrams per 1/4 teaspoon in sea salt. Let's see if it's 550 over here. Oh, it's 480. So I have the same teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon. All the other elements. Turns out Himalayan salt has more of the other elements in it, and by the way, they're more bioavailable, and it might be cleaner than this. This company's done a good job. This company's probably done a good job, but just don't get it where they pinked it up in some weird way. So be careful who you buy it from, but you're going to get way more potassium in that salt, which is more natural. And that's the key. Like a banana, why is it good for you with potassium? Has way more potassium than sodium. Almonds, 800 times more potassium than sodium. So there are those things to consider. This is a little bit of cod liver oil still out there. These are some of the super herbs that you might want to include in your diet. Cayenne pepper, high in vitamin C. Also kills parasites. Thyme kills parasites. Cod liver oil protects you from parasites. So you get the vitamin A, which actually builds up your endothelial lining. Pumpkin seeds, parasite killer. So those are all of your things that you can benefit from by just putting the iodine back. So bottom line, to put iodine back, you have to displace the bromide. So you have to get rid of the bromide coming in. 65% of all pharmaceutical drugs are fluoride-based compounds, so they're messing with your iodine. And 20% are bromide-based compounds, so they're messing with your iodine. So between radiation, between the drugs, between the fact that we don't eat any iodine, we pretend to eat it in the salt, but we're not supposed to eat the salt either. So like, go to the beach, yeah, you could do that. And you could be Japanese and you can go for sushi. But by the way, there's a lot of worms in sushi. You can watch a lot of videos about that too. So if you're gonna go eat sushi, you still gotta worry about worms and parasites. So don't think that's the total solution. All the Japanese do a lot of hot foods, peppers, kimchi, things like that to get rid of the parasites in their fish. So the bottom line is seaweed good, iodine good, a lot of fake foods bad. Industrial food hasn't done anything for us except make us think food looks and tastes better, but it's not true. So that's all I have. Any questions? We can go ahead and wrap.